This Week in Radio Tech, episode 181, is brought to you by Telos Systems and the Telos HX1, HX2, and HX6 on-air talk show systems. Great for interviews, podcasts, and even high-volume talk shows. The best phone hybrid technology ever goes into each HX Studio Hybrid.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twirt.
Can thoughtful preparation reduce the trauma of a studio move? We think so, but Chris Tarr is here with his real-life studio move experience.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Dad?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land.
This is Kirk Harnack.
Chris Tarr, Chris Tobin, and Tom Ray join me for Moving On Up, the execution of a studio move.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, welcome in. It's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Glad you're here. This is the show where we talk about radio technology, and that includes a whole lot of stuff. Sometimes we actually talk about resistors and diodes and transistors and ICs and tuned circuits and coils and capacitors and all that kind of jazz. And sometimes we talk about the logistics of engineering and what engineers have to do and put up with, and maybe some tips to get things done more easily. The whole idea, though, is keeping broadcasters on the air. And broadcasters, whether they be terrestrial over the air, AM or FM, or now internet broadcasting is becoming so popular. And so that's what we talk about here. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. This is our 181st episode of the show. So there's a long trail behind us. Hey, I want to introduce a few co-hosts who are on the show with us. First of all, let's bring in from the Hudson Valley of New York. It's Tom Ray. Hey, Tom. Good morning.
Hey. Yeah, good morning, and how you doing? And by the way, congratulations. You and I will probably chat about that later.
That's right. Yeah, we got elected. Now the work begins, right?
Yes. And I am broadcasting from the home office today, which happens to be on the deck. And anyway, I'm principal of Tom Ray Broadcast Consulting. I also do several other things, such as I'm a rep for Burke Technology and also a rep and dealer for Tieline. So anyway, here I am, and I look forward to what Chris has to say.
Good deal. Thanks for being with us. And is Chris Tobin back with us yet? Yes or no?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. We're working on Chris Tobin. He's going to join us if he possibly can. So our other co-host and today's guest is Chris Tarr, the Ninjaneer from Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Hey, Chris, today I guess you're talking to us from Milwaukee right now, aren't you?
I am. I am in downtown Milwaukee at the brand new facility for 88.9 Radio Milwaukee.
If you follow Chris Tarr on Facebook, or if you've been watching this show or listening to it, you know that Chris has been involved in a huge project. And so, Chris, let's just get right to it. Tell us what's been going on and what you have just accomplished.
A whole lot.
Yeah. Well,
I guess we'll start from the start, and that'll kind of explain where we're at now. The group that I work for, Radio Milwaukee, is a nonprofit organization that operates WYMS FM, which is licensed by the Milwaukee Public School District. We operate it on their behalf. We're an independent entity from the public school district. We have what's essentially you could consider a lease of the license. They decided back in the early 2000s that it wasn't a real good use of taxpayer money to run a radio station. They weren't making enough to break even on it, and they ended up spending money, but they didn't want to get rid of the license. So they decided to put out a request for bids, and the organization I work for got that bid to operate the radio station. So the radio station signed on in 1972. It was originally located in the basement of the Central Services Building for Milwaukee Public Schools on the other side of town here. And that's where it had been most of its life. Now, in 2004, 2005, when my group took over, we built new studios. I wasn't there at the time, but the engineer at the time built new studios in the basement of the Central Services facility. And then it's a very small space. So they leased a storefront across the street, which is, by the way, a fairly busy street, but across the street. And that's where, for example, the executive director, our underwriting people, all of them were across the street. And they operated like this for many, many years. Now, last year, I accepted the position here. One of the first things I did is they said, we need to move. We need to find some place that, we can operate from. We have this building that we like. Can you come down and take a look? So I came down, took a look, and The executive director said, "This is the perfect building for us, I think. What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, we could do this." And her first question, "Well, can you make it happen?" And I said, "If this is the building you want, I'll get you in there." And that's how this began. So what we did is we actually bought 12,000 square foot. Actually, I believe it's 14,000 square foot 2-story building in downtown Milwaukee. Now we don't need all that space, so we're leasing 2,000 square feet to a coffee shop next door. But let's I guess we'll go to the video first. That kind of shows where we were and a little bit of where we're going. And then I can kind of, from there, that kind of sets up what we're going to talk about here with the move. So if you want to roll the video.
I want to warn folks, this video goes by quickly. There's a lot of action packed into 2 minutes and 8 seconds or something like that. So
right, it's a time lapse.
You're going to pay attention to nothing else. Pay attention to
this.
Okay, go ahead.
Smoke in the sky and fire in the air. Desire burns between them. One big push is gonna get you there. Takes a stronger eye to see them. And when you see it in front of you, in a silhouette up ahead, and you see where you're going to. Song, moving every day, going further on. Lead your way, keep on strong. Moving every day, going further on.
Hello, you have 28 new messages. A new message. Sent January 13th.
Break up day till the sun goes down. You work this time between them. A far off land to your own hometown. You've been all around to see them. And when it's standing in front of you, then you take it and you pull it in. And you see where you're going to. Lead your way, sing your song. Moving every day, going further on.
Wow. Tell us
All
what
right.
we saw.
So what you saw was time lapse of us disassembling the old facility, and you can see the beginning there. They panned from the Central Services building over to our other storefront there across that busy street. But you saw us disassembling the facility over at Central Services and putting it back together here at this building. Now, a little bit about this building. We do a lot of live performances. For example, we have Michael Franti, who's going to be performing for us next week. We had been partnering with the Pabst Theater, which is a nonprofit theater here in Milwaukee, to do their shows there because we had no place to put them. Mm-hmm. So when we bought this facility, we purposely, we did a purpose build with this. And so the first floor is a huge 200-seat performance space. And so when we have, Michael Franti in, or we have these artists in, they can go on stage and perform, and we can have our listeners and our friends come by and watch the show. And it ties in actually very well with the coffee shop next door too. They're going to be participating in that. So the reason for being really as a nonprofit radio station, we're not NPR. We are an affiliate. We do one of their shows, but we focus on local music. We focus on stories about Milwaukee. We're really public media for Milwaukee is kind of how we position it. So, we have a lot of public things going on, people coming in and out all the time. And this is really their building. We did a fundraiser. The community has been spectacular. This is a $2.8 million project, and we've already raised in over a year $2.4 million. So our friends have been fantastic with helping us out with this. So really, this is their building, and so we designed it that way. So the first floor, coffee shop, we have a performance space, and we have 2 studios. I'm in one of them right now, just a small production facility. The one you saw in the video is our main studio, and you'll notice that that's pretty large. We've got a console in there. We've got actually a small stage in there as well for when artists come in and play. We also, you might have noticed the barnwood accents. There's an interesting story behind that. We decided to use reclaimed barnwood as some of our accent here in the building, and we put something on Facebook and just said, hey, if anybody has a barn, we'd love to use that. And within about 3 minutes, not only did we have somebody saying, oh, you can take my barn down, you can have it, but we also had, turns out, one of the friends of the station takes down barns for a living. And he said, I'll donate the time to take the barn down and bring the wood over. So
he brought it to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So our performance area and studio and some of our trim is done in this reclaimed barnwood. So we put a big studio downstairs. Now upstairs is a second floor, and that's where all of our offices are. So we have programming and we have administration. I also have 3 more studios upstairs, 1 for production, 2 for doing interviews and voice tracking and short form programming. And then we also, as kind of things kind of fell together on that one, on the roof, we actually have a finished roof. So we have a green roof. We have about half of the roof is greenery, and that obviously collects stormwater runoff, that sort of thing. But then what's not green is actually a deck, and we can do performances up there as well. So we're putting in an elevator and that sort of thing. So we've taken this big building, and we've gone from that little basement that you saw in the video and that little storefront across the street into this brand new facility. And we basically, this building was empty when we got it, and we built studios and offices all in about a year. I started this project. I started with Radio Milwaukee a year ago, September 1st, and we actually broke ground in April, and we're actually just about completely done now. As for the facilities, all digital. We have we're using Axia all over. As a matter of fact, I just bought some more Axia gear. I bought an Axia node for what we're going to do for performances. We have a 24-track audio mixer for our live performances. I have the output of that feeding an Axia node, which then, when we're doing live performances, I can bring up the audio from that in any studio. I have an output of one of my Axia nodes feeding our PA system in house, the PA system of the coffee shop. So we can feed all kinds of stuff with that. The phone and networking is all voice over IP. So I put in all new voice over IP phone system. So we really don't, we were in a great position in that we relied on MPS, Milwaukee Public Schools, for our infrastructure because we were in their house. So, the phone system, networking, all of that stuff was theirs, which it's a school district. It wasn't really conducive to a radio station. They had, proxies and all kinds of things on their network. So now I have fiber running in. We've got our own phone system. We've got our own networking. The audio networking now can go through my cabling, my design. So it really, it's essentially, it allows us to be, we've done some fantastic things at this radio station in spite of the obstacles we had with our location, the infrastructure that we had. In spite of all of that, the station has done exceptionally well. Now we have a brand new facility, that the community has helped us build. And, it's just amazing. We're so excited about the things we're going to be able to do now that we have the space and we have the facilities. So that's kind of the from there to here. Now, the actual move happened this past weekend. I started at 6 o'clock on Friday night. And the one question I get asked the most was, how did I do it without anybody knowing that anything changed? So I'll tell the secret now.
Okay.
It's called an iPod. So what we did was what we decided to do to get the programming out to the transmitter is we decided to leave our access point to the transmitter site where we were at MPS. We decided to leave that infrastructure there. One of the things we do is we simulcast the school board meetings, which happen at that central services building. So we decided to just leave that in place and just get our audio from here to that existing infrastructure. So we put in a T1 line, and I talked to my friend Kirk and got myself a Zip 1 and had that in place between here and our old facility. I have that running through a switcher. And what I did is I had our studio there on one channel and our studio here on the second channel. And I had an iPod that had all of our programming starting at 6 o'clock through about 3 o'clock the next morning. And at 5:59, as the song faded out, Person over at the old studio hit a button. I press play on my iPod over here. There we go. We're still on the air, and we have that going on. And with that done, we were basically on autopilot. We could take the old studio apart, move it, and put it back together. And then when we were done, I could just patch us back in. So the disassembly started at 6 o'clock. It actually went pretty well. That part of it went well. We had the studio taken apart by 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. We had movers move the equipment over, and we started putting it together. Now, we did run into some pitfalls. We did find that my predecessor had run, and not a bad thing, but just one of those things we didn't know about, ran an analog input in for our audio and then used Axia to convert it to digital to send it out to a switcher. So as we were pulling the Axia gear out, we realized that I had to get from analog to digital to stay on the air. Fortunately...
From the iPod, you had to get it to digital somehow.
No. The way that they looped this through, and we're going to address this later on, was the school district when they owned the radio, when they ran the radio station, they used an old Simian system with an old broadcast tool switcher, and that is still kind of what master controls the system for putting the school board meetings on the air. So our facility was simply an input on that switch. Well, he had that feeding into a final switcher, which was all digital. So he had taken that output of that Simian switch, ran it into an analog node, then took the digital output, ran it into that final switch. So with all that stuff in between gone now, I had to get from the analog switcher to the digital switcher. Fortunately, in my box of tools, I had a DA converter, a flying cow DA converter.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right.
So at about 12:30 in the morning, when I was figuring this out, going, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? I pulled that out and made that connection and could take the rest out. So the iPod was playing till 3 a.m. We got the studio on the air with our automation system at 2:45 a.m.
Wait, Saturday morning? You mean, so you did this
Saturday morning
from Friday night till that time Saturday morning? You got it moved.
Yeah, and so we had the basics done. Then later on Saturday morning, we went home, took a little nap, came back and started, putting in things like, connecting the CD players and that sort of thing. But then the story takes a twist. About 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, the server crashes for our automation system. And nobody was touching it. It had been running from the new location for almost a day. A SCSI controller card for one of our drives died, and it was one that you can't really find them easily anymore. Mm-hmm. So, we had to sidetrack everything and spend almost 24 hours doing a workaround with that. I ended up rebuilding the server and getting things back on the air. Yeah, so that was fun. But we have 2 studios put together already. I have the entire building networking done. I have everybody's in here working. We moved in on Monday, so we're actually functioning out of here. Everybody has their computers up and running. The networking's working. I do have 3 more studios to build. The 3 new ones upstairs, and they're on hold just because the cabinetry didn't show up until today. I just saw in the hallway that they delivered the cabinetry. I did buy 3 new Axia consoles for those studios. Those would be real easy to put in, or probably an hour or 2 each. So we have the 2 studios now. We'll have 3 more going in soon. Our first performance is going to be Michael Franti next Wednesday. We'll do that from our new performance studio. So a couple of design elements that I'll go over quick, and then we can talk a little bit more about what you guys want to talk about. But
I got
the
questions.
Studios. The studios themselves are almost there. I call them box within a box. This was a big factory or foundry before years before when we bought it. So I hired an acoustical engineer to help me out with acoustics. But the studios are boxes within boxes. So essentially, we've got these big, industrial, ceilings. I mean, they go all the way to 20 feet. And they've got, overhead cranes and things still up there, which we thought were cool. We didn't want to put in drop ceilings and ruin that vibe. So we left that. But we essentially built these boxes, which are the studios. And the studio construction are 3 layers of drywall. Then we've got staggered studs, alternating studs. Then that's filled with insulation. Then we have 3 more layers of drywall. And then, for example, between the studio I'm at and the studio next to me, which is the main studio, is an elevator shaft. They don't touch. The walls don't touch. There's a gap between the elevator shaft and the two studios. You can actually see right through. So these studios are pretty quiet, except when you heard the buzzsaw next door, because they were hammering, and you can kind of faintly hear that through the walls. But that was the soundproofing down here. Same thing with the studios upstairs. Same kind of construction. The roof, by the way, the ceiling also has not only 3 layers of drywall, but also an acoustical drop ceiling to it as well. The performance area is open. I have a lighting truss, and you kind of saw that in the video. It's got some spotlights on it. The ceiling is sprayed. Ceiling throughout the building, because they were metal. It was metal ceilings. Are sprayed with an acoustical spray that it's kind of like Christmas tree flocking type of stuff, which also deadens the sound. And then all the studios have acoustical material on the walls. And then, like I said, the green roof. Oh, the doors. These doors are amazing. They weigh hundreds of pounds. They're steel and then insulated in between, and then the doors are all double gasketed. So we had a lot of fun when I had people come to visit before we put the studios in, and I'd walk them into the studio, and you'd hear the din of the construction going on, and as the door closed, it went completely silent, and you could hear your foot. As you walked around the studio, because there was nothing going on in the studio yet, you could hear your foot fall on the carpet. It was so quiet in there. So that was fantastic. That worked out very, very well. The only thing that we're still waiting on is we don't have our elevator yet. So we're going up 2 flights of stairs to go to the second floor. Running up and down. I must have lost probably a good 10, 15 pounds in the past week running up and down the stairs. Really, we went from being a radio station crammed into a school building into a building that was designed to be a radio station. So, we really, we didn't spend money foolishly, but I was allowed to spend it smartly. I have a generator for all the critical items. The racks are set up. I decided against a central UPS system. What I did is I did a kind of a redundant rack system. So I have 5 equipment racks. Each rack has 2 circuits. Each on an independent circuit breaker. One is shore power that just connects directly to the utility in the generator. The other one is fed by a UPS, which is on a separate circuit, and that's for each of the racks. So there's actually 10 circuits that go into the rack room. So if any one strip goes stupid, it'll only trip the breaker on that particular strip. Everything else is unaffected. And then that's all, like I said before, backed up on a generator. I also have a split AC system in that room. So not only is it fed by the house system, but if the house system fails, I have a smaller AC unit, 1 or 2 ton, that will continue to cool that room in the event that the air conditioning goes down. Because again, audio over IP, everything is in that room. Cat 6 in the entire building. Each studio has 12 runs. I'm not using them all, but it's nice to have them. As I said, voice over IP, and then we have a VPN to Milwaukee Public School District, so that I have some equipment still over at our old facility that'll have to stay there for school board meetings and things like that. I can access that through VPN. So, really just it was great because we had no infrastructure to move in that respect other than the studio stuff. So I really had the opportunity to just create it from scratch because it was an empty building with nothing in it. So it really was a good opportunity to kind of, really design it the way I wanted it designed. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll take questions.
I'm sure Tom will have a question, but I want to jump in with one right away. You talked earlier about you selected, bought, and put in a VoIP phone system. I'm assuming this is for the offices, but also for the studio.
Well, we converted to analog for the studio, and the reason being is that we still have the old NX phone system. So yeah. It uses analog. So what I did is I bought FXS cards, which basically take voice over IP trunks and convert them to analog, and then I feed the studio. Now next, that'll be on my upgrade path will be, in the next couple of years to buy the VX system, which I can plug right into my switch and go completely voice over IP, and it will remain digital the entire time.
My question actually is more toward how you selected the VoIP system that you use for business purposes, and in that you convert to POTS for your on-air system. So were you kind of new to ordering VoIP service? I guess you got VoIP coming into the building now instead of PRI or POTS. Tell me about that process. There's a lot of engineers, including, believe it or not, myself. I've never ordered a VoIP other than, Magic Jack or Vonage. But someday I'm going to be ordering VoIP for my radio stations in Mississippi. Well, come think of it, that we already do have 8x8 service there, but it's an off-site PBX. What was your process in doing that, and what did you find out in the process you would want to share with other engineers?
It was definitely a learning experience. I was very fortunate in that early on, I met at one of our events. I met a gentleman who is one of 3 people in the world or something, or in the country, who has 6 Cisco certifications. Runs an IT consulting company, and so he introduced himself and said, "Yeah, I contract IT work. I'd love to help you out." And obviously, with it being just me, I was looking for an integrator. Yeah. So I brought him in, and he is very familiar with voice over IP systems. Obviously, he's a Cisco guy. Cisco VoIP systems he's really into. So he helped me select a vendor. We're using a company called Next Vortex, and one of the reasons I chose them is they have unlimited channel availability. Now, for people who don't know, a channel is essentially a virtual line. So each channel is a phone call. Well, twice a year we do our membership drives. And one of the reasons I wanted to do voice over IP is these membership drives, where we go from our normal call volume to I need an additional at least 10 lines for volunteers to take pledges. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do in the analog world, because you have to have 10 phone lines either that you're sitting there paying for all year and you use for 2 weeks a year or whatever, or you pay to have them installed and disconnected. The great thing about VoIP and the service that we're with, Next Vortex, is I don't have to worry about that. I have a line for the phone bank, and the system itself will just scale to as many channels as I need. So the week that we're doing these fundraisers, I just plug in the phones and go. And the system itself will scale, and I'll get billed per minute after a buck. You pay for a bucket of minutes each month. You go over that, and then you pay a per minute charge. But you don't pay extra for if I'm using 1 channel of phone or 100 channels. I don't pay any difference. It doesn't cost me any less.
Is that fairly typical for VoIP services?
Not necessarily. It's getting to be. That's getting to be kind of a selling point. But a lot of the people that I looked at, you pay for 5 channels or you pay for 6 channels, and you could buy more for a month and have additional channels for that 1 month, and then change it again. So it was one of those things where most services come with a preset amount of channels, and once you use them, you either busy out or you have to buy, expand those channels or whatever. So the one thing about this system that I liked was that it didn't matter. I didn't have to worry about that. It was just all basically I get 2,500 minutes a month of calling, and then after that it's 2 cents a minute or whatever.
So what's the name of that provider again?
Next Vortex, NEXVORTEX.
Are they nationwide or just in your area?
Yeah, they're nationwide.
Okay, Next Vortex. All right.
And then the other thing about that was that the provider the IT consultant that I'm using has a relationship with them and with the fiber company that I'm using for fiber internet. So at the end of the day, he was able to work out a deal where I've got at least between us and the NOC for the internet provider, which is all fiber between here and there, which is really only 2 blocks away. I've got QoS tagging through our system and their system out to the public internet for VoIP. So essentially what that means is I can control all the way to the internet QoS tagging for phone calls, which is actually kind of unusual with internet providers. Typically you can handle QoS in your building and you can send the tags, but there's no guarantee that whoever you're using as a provider will respect those tags. So,
unless you're paying for a point-to-point WAN or something like that. But
right.
So your VoIP, your SIP service from this Next Vortex, this comes in along the same fiber as your station's public internet usage.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, but it is QoS tagged. If it wasn't QoS tagged, my guess is it would still be okay for the most part.
Yeah, we have plenty of pipe, but this allows us, and we also, as I mentioned before, I have a direct fiber connection from our building to our internet provider's peering point because it's only a block or 2 away. So they flew over the poles fiber directly from them to myself. So, I have the capability of cranking, as much bandwidth as I possibly could use, I can get through this connection. So all in all, it makes for a very robust system. And, again, I have 3 phone lines in the building, and that's it. I've got, and they're for alarms, fire alarms, and for the phone system for the elevator. Everything else is completely over the internet. I don't even have fax. We went to eFax for that. So, so really, again, it was just a matter of, I think the best part the best piece of advice that I would give anybody is find somebody who's kind of experienced in this area to help you out, because it is difficult to navigate. And I was very fortunate, again, to have the guy that I used help me with this, because not only was he able to help me with integrating the phone system, but as a Cisco guy, he understood the routers and the switches, and I could tell him things like, I want to be sure Axie is handled this way, and my automation system Enco is handled this way, and our network is handled this way. And, he worked with me to make sure that everything functioned correctly. I wanted to keep the network separate, but I wanted to be able to VLAN some things in order to share some resources across the networks. And again, he was able to help me set that up. And, as the guy who was responsible for this entire project, I really couldn't get hung up on little things like that. I wanted to be able to just say, okay, here's what I want to do. Can you help me make that happen? And that's what happened.
How did you end up picking out your VoIP PBX that's in the building, and which one did you end up getting?
I'm using a Cisco small business system, and I picked it mostly based on price and features. For example, our system has Bluetooth built in, so you can pair your cell phone with it, so that if you're sitting at your desk, you can use your desk phone not only for calls over VoIP, but calls over your cell phone. They're also wireless, so we can roam around the building with the phone set, and just, it has a power supply if you're not using the power over Ethernet. So you can bring a power brick with you, plug in the phone anywhere in the building, even if there's not a network connection, and get online. So this system had a lot of really nice features for small business, for the things we want to do. Because again, one of the things I wanted to do here was, for so many years, the people at our organization had these constraints on what they could do and where they could do it because of the old infrastructure. So I really wanted to change the paradigm a little bit and say, whatever you want to do, we can do. You want to work wherever you want. You want to go over to the coffee shop with your PBX phone, that's fine. Unplug your phone, whatever the coffee shop next door, plug it in. It'll VPN back in if it can't see our network. As long as it can see any network, it'll phone home and connect to our system. So, I wanted to give people the ability to pretty much to not think about what is going to get in their way of doing whatever it is they want to do. So if they want to take their phone and go next door and drink coffee and plug it in, that's fine. If they want to, take their phone home and work from home for a day, that's fine too. So that was kind of the thought process when I picked the gear that I did, was what will let us do pretty much whatever it is we want. I tried to take away all the limits that we could possibly think of.
The POTS adapters that you got to feed like your NX12 studio phone system, do those plug in the Cisco, or are they sit out on the network somewhere?
Those plug into the Cisco box. The router, the Cisco box is the SIP server and our. I'm sorry, it plugs into a Cisco router or a Cisco switch. So the SIP system is actually a rack mount appliance that goes into the rack, and then it plugs into a network switch. The FXS cards plug into that network appliance, and it just provides phone jacks coming out of it. I can also plug in, if I need to, I can also plug in an analog line or two and use that as a fallback.
Chris, well, I was going to ask, that makes sense, but was there a reason you converted to POTS so you didn't stay in the digital domain? Was it maybe an economic decision so you didn't have to buy new studio phone systems?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The budget that I had, I looked at, really what, did it make sense to invest in new phone systems for the studios, when really we don't do a lot of phone calls. We're mostly music. Our phones are essentially just used for contests. We barely even put them on the air. So I decided that it was just better to spend the money elsewhere, and it came with one FXS card, and I think the second one was like $300-$400, and that provided us with 8 analog lines off the SIP trunk. So that was enough to feed all of our phone systems.
Yeah, and your NX phone system, you happen to have a Telos NX, although you could have had somebody else's too. But it'll take POTS, of course, or ISDN, but that one won't take SIP.
Right.
But if you're converting there, the biggest problem with the POTS lines is when they run 4 miles to the central office or 11 miles to the central office, you've got them right there in the same building. And so your loss of quality is kind of minimal at that point. You do have some codecs involved at each end, which if you had SIP, you wouldn't have that. But, SIP in your on-air. But that's a good decision. And as you said, later on, you'll upgrade to a SIP-based on-air phone system.
The only challenge we had with that is I had to work with our vendor on it was they didn't quite comprehend how I wanted the hunt group to work. That a top down, so it would ring on the one number, and then the second, third, fourth. It started doing this where it'd ring the first one for 4 rings. If it didn't answer, it'd start ringing the second line for 4 rings.
Oh, okay.
And it would do this round robin thing. Yeah. And so it took a little bit of working with the vendor.
When they do it that way, the hunting becomes the disc jockey hunting for which line is going to ring next.
Right. So
it's kind of like whack-a-mole on your phone.
There you go. So that was the theory behind that.
Oh, cool. Well, okay. I know you got to go soon, and I appreciate, Chris, you spend this time with us at this interesting, odd time we're doing the show. You mentioned some surprises, and one of them was that unfortunate RAID controller failure, but you managed to get that fixed and rebuilt. That to me, that was amazing. I saw your plea go out on Facebook. Does anybody have an Enco RAID controller? I'm thinking, oh man, good luck with that. Jeez. What would you say other than those things? What was your biggest surprise? Maybe your biggest takeaway from this process? This moving process.
I think the biggest takeaway is to have good help. And my best friend Tony Falter, who was my assistant at Intercom, came to help me, and also a good friend of mine, Tim Burke, who's a systems administrator in Chicago, came up. And it's amazing how they stepped up and really helped me accomplish the things I needed to accomplish. So the biggest takeaway I had on this was as an engineer, you try to do these things on your own. It's my building, I'll do it. But I had really good friends, and they participated and really helped me out. And if it weren't for them, I never would have gotten it done over a weekend.
Yeah, amazing. And having good friends to help you out. That, hey, give somebody a project, it's going to be handled, and you don't have to handle it. Free up a lot of time. Well, I know you'll be putting out little fires and hooking up little things over the next few days and even weeks before it's all just 100% perfect. But man, you moved it fast.
Yep, sure did.
All righty. Well, Chris, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. I know you got to go.
Thanks.
So you go ahead and go, and we're going to take our little commercial break here. Chris Tarr telling us about his move at Radio Milwaukee, public radio in Milwaukee there, and that's just great. Chris Tarr, if you want to check out his website for engineers, broadcastengineering.info. Broadcastengineering.info. You'll find forums there where you can participate as a broadcast engineer and talk to other engineers, solve your problems, and who knows, maybe that's where Chris ended up finding his Enco RAID controller last weekend. Our show's being brought to you by, that's This Week in Radio Tech, it's being brought to you by my employer, Telos, and our line of inexpensive telephone hybrids. We were just talking about telephone hybrids, and Telos offers a range of 3 different systems that are in the pretty low price category. The basic one-line telephone hybrid, the Telos HX1. Now, this baby is just amazing in what it has in it, and the price is about $800 US for the Telos HX1. It's a single-line POTS telephone hybrid. It's got audio processing built right into it. You might pay a couple $300 for an audio processor or more to do what this one does. It's got digital dynamic EQ. It has settings. It works with POTS phone systems around the world. You set it for the country that you're in. It's got some dip switches to set it, and it will take care of making sure it's got the ring cadence, the time between dialing digits, the ring voltage, the battery voltage. It's got all that stuff right, So you can plug it in no matter where you are in the world and be assured that it's going to behave correctly for that phone line. There's the dip switches right there, and there's even another bunch of dip switches inside. So this is your basic one-line hybrid. It's got the caller audio coming out of it on the back on a balanced XLR connection. It's got audio you send to the caller, and then, of course, there's the phone line coming in, and you can also hook up a handset coming out. So that's now there's also the HX2. This is just simply 2 HX1s in one box. This is actually a very good deal. It's amazing to me how many of these folks around the world have purchased. For under $1,400 US, it's 2 telephone hybrids in one box, maybe $1,300 US. I gotta check on that. But it's a great deal. 2 of them, and they each have auto answer built into them. The HX1 and the HX2, you can dip switch set it for auto answer. Now that used to be an option on earlier Telos hybrids, but it's built in now. So if you need a line to auto answer and give you a closure so you can play an announcement to a caller automatically, it's got that built right into it. It also has a hold function. Now, it seems kind of weird for a one-line hybrid to have a hold function, but it does just change the behavior of the hybrid so that the caller's on hold, not putting out audio to your console if you need to basically mute the caller for a moment. Then there's a multi-line phone system for use in talk shows, and that's the Telos HX6. The HX6 will accept 6 POTS phone lines or 3 ISDN phone lines, giving you 6 talk channels. And it's got the same audio processing built right into it. It also, you'll need to purchase with it a Telos VSET6 controller. So the combination of the HX6 and the VSET6 controller, you've got a 6-line phone system. And it has 2 hybrids in it, not 1, but 2. So you can conference people together properly. You don't lose any quality when you have, let's say, a expert guest on one line, and then you're taking listener callers on the other hybrid. You can absolutely do this, no loss in quality when you conference them together. And you can set it up to supply just 1 mix minus to the hybrids, to both hybrids. So maybe your audio console, maybe you've got an analog console or an older one that only has 1 possible bus to make a mix minus. No problem. You run that one to the back of the HX6, and the HX6 will conference those callers together correctly and let them each hear each other and the mix minus audio from the board. So please check them all out. You can go to the Telos website at telos-systems.com and look for the HX1, the HX2, or the HX6. By the way, there's brochures you can download, and you can download the manual for any of our products right online. You don't have to register. You don't have to sign up for email. You don't have to sign up for our newsletter. You can just download the manuals right there on the website. We won't even ask you who you are. Check it out, telos-systems.com. And I thank Telos Systems for sponsoring this episode of This Week in Radio Tech. Episode number 181, and I see that Chris Tobin has joined us. So now we've got Tom Ray and Chris Tobin on the lines. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Welcome in.
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So we're talking about studio moves, and I know that both Tom and you, Chris, have been involved in the last few years in major studio moves. Not that Milwaukee, Wisconsin is a small market. It's an important station and a beloved station in that market. But Chris, you moved an all news 1010 Winds, and Tom, you moved News Talk WOR in the last few years. Without getting into enormous detail here, let's at least talk about some of the things that you learned and really took away from your move experience. What might you do different, or what did you find that you actually planned for really, really well before this happened? Now, to tell you what, Tom, if you don't mind, let's go to you first. You moved WOR a few years ago. Gee, it's been, about 8 or 9 years ago now?
About 8 years ago, yep.
Yeah. What was? I know you had some frustrations there with some electricians and unions and glass people and air conditioning people, but maybe just talk about the broadcast stuff. What'd you learn? What'd you take away?
To run in the other direction if I ever have to do that again. No. It was interesting. Plus we put in the Axia system, which was a departure from anything we'd done in the past. Everything we had before was analog, and putting in a digital system is a completely different animal. But what you need to do is you need to sit down, and Chris had it thought out, very well. You have to sit down, you have to think of all the what ifs, you have to think of how you're going to maintain signal, and then just carry through and plan for things that just kind of crop up because, as my mother used to say, blank happens.
Okay. Well, okay, so you put an audio over IP. It happened to be an Axia system, I guess, at the time you bought that. It was the only one on the market. And I know you come to think of it, you got a fairly early Axia system that had some growing pains. But thinking about, just moving the facility. Okay, how did you see? Chris played an iPod for some hours in his move. I don't think you had that option. How did you actually handle the cutover?
Well, we actually had three stations, so to speak. We had two national radio networks plus WOR to move over, and the advantage we had that Chris didn't have is we didn't move a studio like he did. We had everything brand new in place. So what we did was we had a main and a backup server for the ENCO. We brought over several workstations with the backup server, got them up and running. At, it was 10 in the morning, at 10:06:40, we had to cut over WOR Radio Network 2, which was basically a patch cord move over at ABC, now Cumulus Satellite. And of course, between top of the hour and between actual airtime, which is 06:40, we had about 6 to 7 minutes to get that accomplished and make sure levels were set. At 11 a.m., we did the same thing with WR Radio Network 1, and at 12:06:40, I had somebody over in, the late Kerry Richards was over at 1440 Broadway, and he sat there with me on the phone, and he put a finger on I had my finger on the button because I had transmitter control, and we had an audio switcher at the transmitter, and we had two STL paths. I had a T1. He had a microwave link at his end, and I said, just tell me when the guy signs off. And the guy signed off, and he said, this is WR New York, and I went, click, boom, programming hit from 111 Broadway.
Amazing. Yeah, well planned. Well done.
So,
well, I don't know what you can say or can't say, but now thinking about non-electronic, non-console, non-broadcast, what was your biggest surprise or frustration in getting the new studios built?
Oh, Lord, we had a good architect. The problem was him and the air conditioning people didn't seem to understand broadcast, even though they had come over to the former studios to see what we had in place, and what we had to do. The classic thing, you mentioned the glass. Well, Vince Fiola had of Studio Technologies built the furniture, and Vince came up about 2 weeks beforehand to say, I just want to make sure we got all the measurements right to make sure we don't have trouble getting something in here. When we walked in, now we didn't have the raised floor in place yet, but he looked at me and I looked at him. They had a mock-up window in place, and I said, that's low. And he said, yeah, we measured it, and sure as heck it was low. And the architect happened to be there, and he went, oh yeah, well, he says, you can't really put it much higher than that. He says, because, if you have junk piled here or something over there, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't low, it was high. It was way high. That's right, because he says, if you pile crap on the countertop, he says, they're going to see it in the other room. And I said, yeah, but at the time we had a producer who was 5 feet tall. How's she going to see over the bottom of the glass? And he went, oh. And then the air conditioning people, I had specified, they were unbelievable. I had specified I wanted 10 tons of air conditioning just for the studios. They insisted on getting a BTU load, and of course, I don't have no piece of broadcast equipment comes with a BTU load, but it does come with a power requirement. And real bluntly, Lord, I'm pulling a blank here. The theory of energy conservation says that if you have a unit that takes a kilowatt in, it's not going to put more than a kilowatt out. So I just added up the power consumption of everything in the room and handed them kilowatts, and they didn't understand that, so I converted it to BTUs, and it came in at about 8.3 tons of air conditioning. Wow. And they put 10 tons in, but they also fed it over to the newsroom and fed it over to master control, and of course it was too hot in the studios. And then they had to come in and put it in after that. And it was difficult in that building because it's a landmark building, and you can't just go ahead and add louvers outside. If there's a window, it stays because it's a historical building. So it was a challenge. There were a couple of challenges, but overall it went pretty smooth.
Wow. All right. Well, Tom, thanks for that. And Chris Tobin is now with us too. Chris, you moved an operation too, a very busy one, 1010 Winds. Any recollections from that would be good to share with our viewers?
Oh, sure. We actually, the move that I did was 1010 Wins, and also 5 other radio stations in the CBS group here in New York. So
oh yes, of course, yeah.
It was a challenge. So 6 total radio stations were being moved to the new building. 5 of them moved first. The 6th one came later, but the planning required all 6 to be considered. So it was a challenge. First things, we were moving into a building that was looking to become LEED certified, which is the process by which a building becomes green for energy efficiency. There's a whole series of certifications and levels. So in order for us to build and design what we wanted, we had to understand LEED certifications and green buildings and what that involved. So working with the architect and the HVAC architectures, the consultants and the electrical, it was a challenge. So things we found out that you could take it granted for in the years past, you can't do anymore. I won't get into detail. It's just a mess. Once you understand it, you're off and running and things work out very well. So at the end, that part of the infrastructure, the building infrastructure for the studios worked out very well. Internally, for the broadcast side of things, a challenge was the facilities were moving from legacy buildings, legacy studio designs, and basically, as we all know, when you built a radio station 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, in the case of 1010 Wins, 20 years ago, certain technologies existed and some of them today don't exist. So you sort of learn what you can and can't do with the old stuff and what you'd like to do with the new. So we had program directors and news directors asking, we'd like to be able to do this, and this in the newsroom, this, and this in the music studios. What do you think? So the engineering department sat there where you looked at each other going, well, that's an interesting challenge. I think we can make it work. So what came of that was we decided to build various VLANs throughout the entire facility. So rather than traditionally you may do home run multi-pair cables, if you will, to each studio or designate a bundle of cables as this is FM Studio 1, FM Studio 2, AM Studio 3. We came up with a design of Cat 5 everywhere. At the time it was Cat 6 everywhere. And then what we put on that wire was just strictly VLAN design. So all of the radio stations had various VLANs they accessed. So if you're in a studio, say FM Music Studio 1, one of the radio stations, 92.3 now, we'll call it, and you had an automation computer, you could plug it into that wall jack. Didn't matter what the wall jack said. That computer's IP address was on a VLAN that it knew where to find its way home.
Oh,
then we did the same thing. Did the same thing with the phone system, which was a completely IP phone system. And then we did the same thing with the console system, the distribution of the consoles. So by the time we were done, rather than have to figure out, as Chris pointed out, what he did, rather than figure out, well, I can only plug into this jack on the wall because it's purple. Purple means voice, or yellow means broadcast. You can plug into any of them.
Okay, so here's my tech question about that. I'm sorry, let me sidebar for a second. So you have a situation. What's the controller that determines? You have this IP address. You're going to go on this VLAN. Where do you program that?
Well, that's through the managed switches. So we had managed switches. Each of the switches for the various VLANs had we had certain wires or jacks were strictly dedicated. Say in the case of automation and on-air, what I call broadcast revenue networks. They were kept physically separate from a couple of the office networks, but you had the ability to cross between them if necessary.
Now, and when you cross between switches. So when you cross between VLANs, is this done at the switch level?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had layer 2 switches all over the place, and so we basically, if you wanted to plug in your laptop into any of the wall jacks, you could. You'd only get a DHCP IP address from the permitted server. Because your laptop wasn't already, your MAC address wasn't already a reservation on the system. There's a lot of details. This is a very broad stroke VLAN discussion. Because I know there are friends of mine listening, watching right now going, dude, there's more to it than that. I'm like, yeah, I know.
You give me the layman's answer. So I would have thought there'd have to be a centralized, maybe a core switch that tells the others what to do. Do you program each switch individually, or is there a core server that determines this kind of thing?
Well, there is a core switch, yes.
A core switch, okay.
That was the other thing. We had 2 core switches, which were designed to be redundant to each other, so they were virtual. First switch, physical switch 1, we'll call it, and then it was physical switch number 2. But as far as the primary and secondary switches were concerned, when the primary was in charge, the secondary was just a virtual switch. The IP addresses would move back and forth. So we literally had the ability, you could take one switch off, one core offline, and everything continues to function. And those core switches were interconnected to the various switches that controlled throughout the plant via fiber. And that way we had the bandwidth we needed and everything else. And because we're a part of the CBS network, we had our campus dark fiber connection to the rest of the company. So we had bandwidth everywhere. It was just a question of how we shaved it off, if you will, the fiber. So VLANs for that stuff, you know, the phones, as Chris pointed out with the phone service, what I did was we worked with our phone vendor, came up with a wireless phone solution. So it was Wi-Fi, managed Wi-Fi, very important to know. And it was a VoIP phone, but you could take this phone, walk throughout the entire plant, and it was carrier class telecom. And you can talk, your extension was on that phone. You could have other extensions on the phone too. And because we were a tech operations center, which is the 24-hour facility, the phones had your own, extension on it, plus the TOC extension, plus other numbers that people would call throughout the plant for help. So you could walk around anywhere, the 2 floors of the building we were in, and on occasion we could set up to go downstairs to the coffee shop, as Chris did, and you can stay in touch. I also worked with the guys to design for the laptops to be wireless, so the Wi-Fi. Now, you'd say, why would you want to do that in an office environment? 2 reasons. One, you have a Salesforce. Salesforce, the last thing you want them to do is walk into an office or a cubicle, find their Cat5 cable, plug it in, and break the connector after time. You do the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is secured. You do it properly. They walk in, they pop open laptop, turn on, and they go on and do their business.
Yeah.
Same thing is true for the newsrooms. And we had also WFAN, which is the all-sports station. Visiting reporters, visiting presenters, all kinds of stuff. So rather than lock them into a cable in a booth or a cubicle or an office, as we did in the old buildings, we came up with a wireless solution that was secure, but managed and carrier class. Now, when I say carrier class, those of us who remember the days of telephones and T1s and ISDN, carrier class meant 5 nines reliability, 99.999%. Talking about a systems failure of about, 10 seconds or 1 minute a year of any one given system? That kind of reliability. We've come to acknowledge that through the phone services of old. Nowadays in IP, it takes a little more to do it. That's what we worked on. After we figured out how to make that work mechanically and electronically, the rest was just rolling it out, and it worked. And to this day, I know, talking to friends of mine at the facilities, things are going, they're scalable, so they could just plug in stuff and build, as Chris pointed out with his facility, he can scale on his systems. Same is true there. As far as with the architects and the non-broadcast people, Tom is right. You have folks who may design stuff for broadcast. The architects that did the work for us at CBS, they know their stuff. They're musicians, they're into the stuff, into the technology, they get it. Working with the other contractors was kind of rough because they don't do broadcast every day. So if you don't do it every day, you don't catch all the nuances.
Sure.
But the architects were great overseeing the project and understanding what was needed. But it was interesting talking with electricians, explaining to them why we need the outlets, in a certain position in the room, a certain height, because they're telling me, well, they're 12 inches above the baseboard. That's what the code is. I said, yeah, but I don't need it there. I need it higher. Really? But it's fine. Don't worry. We'll be okay. We're still within code. It's just time. As Tom pointed out with the window, well, I don't want anything in front of the window because then you can see through. You can see it. It's like, yeah, that's nice. That's not what we do.
That's nice. That's not what we do. I love it.
Same thing with the air conditioning. The air conditioning guys came in. They did this whole presentation and they show us what they're going to do. And we asked them. I said, okay, so what is the sound level? What is the attenuation, sound attenuation, SPL, and there's acoustic tolerance number. And I can't think of it now. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, we're going into studios. I can't have rumbling air ducts. Are they going to be lined? Is it a high volume, low velocity? Or turns out they had a high velocity, low volume system. It's going to be very noisy. So after we got past that, things got worked out well. But there's a lot of stuff you don't realize when you're moving facilities, whether it be one radio station and multiple studios or multiple radio stations with multiple studios. Oh, we also, did I mention, we had to factor in web content, which meant webcams, video, and how would we handle and manage that down the road. So part of the VLAN thinking, part of the core switches, part of the fiber distribution, we factored in bandwidth for video. So at the time that I was there, we were able to sustain without frame loss or frame drops within I think 2 frames, which is the standard I think TV folks were following. We can manage easily 8 megabits of HD video at 1080i without any dropouts over a period of 1 hour. Fine. Because I didn't mention, part of CBS Radio is also part of CBS Television. And CBS TV2 locally did a lot of work with WFAN Sports and 1010 Wins News and CBS AM News. So guess what? Flash cams had to be in the radio newsrooms with lighting. So now all of a sudden our radio newsrooms had camera stand-up positions for TV news people. Yeah. So that added another dynamic. So when Chris mentions the bandwidth and his fiber connection between his central office and his facility, something to think about nowadays with IP, because there's that nasty word, overhead.
With IP bandwidth, it feels like we're at the point now where you better plan, because some of us may think, well, we got 50 megabits up and down. I mean, that should be enough for anybody.
No.
As we famously remember Bill Gates saying, 640K is enough for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, so just on the topic of overhead and bandwidth, how much you have. We had started doing some early testing with the IT group. We have broadcast IT and we have the office IT group. The broadcast IT group were familiar with bandwidth issues, so they were trying to educate the other guys. And there were times we were doing some tests with the video, and we say, well, this is an 8 megabit video connection, looks pretty good. And then one of the guys goes, well, it's not 8 megabits on my switch diagnostic panel. I said, no, it shouldn't be. Expect about another 15% overhead. What? We didn't factor then. You said 8 megabits, so that's what we gave you. I'm like, no, I need actually 10 megabits to get by with any CBR or VPR bandwidth control. Oh, boy, talk about breaking the mold and getting people upset. Something you have to definitely consider.
What I was going to mention about planning for the future, and we know the aerial density of like hard drives gets greater and greater and greater. We get more stuff on hard drive. I was just I went to Costco last night, pushing the car through, and there's hard drives now. Your kind of MyBook Live kind of hard drives, the standalone hard drives, 4 terabytes for $160. 4 freaking terabytes.
Remember that was just a dream.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be 4 terabytes. That's what the government has, right?
Right.
They have 4 terabytes. Can you fit the whole internet on 4 terabytes?
Possibly.
We could try.
Check with the NSA.
Guys, we got to go. Tom and Chris, thanks so much for your participation. I appreciate it. Tom, Ray, any quick parting words?
No, just congratulations to both you and I as being on the SBE board, and hope it'll be a good year or actually a good 2-year term. And anyway, see you all next week.
At the meeting in Indianapolis. Do you know if you're going there at the end of October?
Oh, I'm definitely going because I can't let you on the town without me.
All right. Hey, guys, thanks a lot. We got to roll. Our show's been brought to you by Telos Systems and the Telos HX1, HX2, and HX6. Lower cost telephone hybrids and talk show system. Thanks very much. Chris Tarr was our guest earlier in the show, and Chris Tobin and Tom Ray added toward the end of the show with stories of moving studios. We learn a lot when we move studios, and that's one reason I really like to talk about that. We'll do it again sometime and maybe hit IT and VoIP phones just a bit more. I'd like to explore those categories a bit more in the future. All right. Thanks to Andrew Zarian for being up at this special time and switching and producing our show. It'll be online in a few days. Be sure that you check it out online. Easy thing to do is to go subscribe. Go to gfqnetworks.com or go to thisweekinradiotech.com and subscribe to the podcast, because that way it gets downloaded automatically into your device, whatever it may be. That's it. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pilfer this week. Another tort has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penny Lopez Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.